The camera flashes never stopped. Every smile she gave became a story. Every glance, a headline. But behind that platinum hair and red lipstick was a girl who just wanted to be loved, not admired, not owned, just loved. Her name was Marilyn Monroe, and this is the story the world never truly knew. A story of beauty and pain, fame and fragility of a woman who made the world fall in love while she quietly fell apart. Every generation thinks they know her. The dress, the smile, the whispers. But very few know the soul that lived beneath the myth. A woman far more intelligent, lonely, and brave than anyone imagined. This is not a story about a star who burned out too soon. It's about the light she left behind and why, even after 60 years, that light still flickers inside us all. Before she was Marilyn Monroe, she was Norma Jeane Mortenson, born on June 1st, 1926, in a small Los Angeles hospital where the sun never seemed to stop shining. But sunshine doesn't always mean warmth. Her father vanished before she could say his name. Her mother, Gladys, struggled with her mind, a woman lost between brilliance and breakdown, in and out of hospitals, leaving little Norma to navigate the world alone. There were no bedtime stories, no birthdays with candles or laughter, just foster homes one after another, each one promising care, and each one reminding her that she didn't quite belong anywhere. Sometimes, the state sent her back to orphanages. Cold walls, quiet tears, a child too small to understand why love always seemed temporary. That's where she learned something the world would never forget. When people don't see you, you learn to create a version of yourself that they can't look away from. By 16, she was desperate to escape the system. So she did the only thing a girl could. She married the boy next door, James Dougherty, a quiet factory worker who offered safety, not passion. They were children trying to play house in a world that didn't care if the walls fell down. But life had other plans. When World War II came, her husband went to sea, and Norma Jeane went to work at a munitions factory in Van Nuys. The air was filled with noise, heat, and the dull rhythm of machines shaping metal for war. And then, one afternoon, a photographer walked in, taking pictures for a magazine. He stopped when he saw her. The light hit her face in a way that didn't seem accidental. It was as if the universe paused a whisper saying, "This is where her story begins." That one photograph turned into a modeling contract. And in just months, the shy orphan with freckles and dreams was on billboards and magazine covers smiling. That smile the world would come to know. But before the world knew Marilyn Monroe, she had to bury Norma Jeane. She dyed her hair platinum blonde, practiced her walk, her laugh, her voice. Every gesture rehearsed. Every glance, a performance. And slowly, the girl who once had no home became a woman the whole world wanted to claim. But even then, late at night, Norma Jeane would whisper to herself, "I hope they see more than my face. I hope they see my heart." Because the truth was, beneath the red lipstick and curled hair, she was still that little girl from the orphanage, still searching for someone who wouldn't leave. And as Hollywood's golden gates began to open for her, she stepped through with trembling hands, ready to be seen, but not yet ready for what fame would take in return. Hollywood in the late 1940s was a dream painted in gold. Spotlights, red carpets, laughter that echoed through smoke-filled rooms, and in the middle of it all, a new face everyone was starting to notice: Marilyn Monroe. She signed with 20th Century Fox, told to smile more, talk less, and never age. She learned early that beauty was currency, and she spent it carefully even when it hurt. But Marilyn wasn't just a pretty face. She had ambition, fierce, quiet, burning from somewhere deep inside. She studied every movement, every line of dialogue. She watched the greats, Garbo, Gable, Lombard, and thought, "I can do that. I can do more." Her first roles were small, a waitress here, a secretary there, but even in the background, the camera couldn't look away. There was something different about her, a kind of sadness beneath the smile, a softness that made people feel protective, even when she didn't need them to be. Then came the breakthrough films like Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire. In each role, she shimmered, the innocent, the temptress, the dream. Every frame seemed to glow around her, as if light itself had fallen in love. But that glow came at a cost. Studio executives shaped her image like sculptors, every curve, every line rehearsed to perfection. She was told how to walk, how to laugh, even how to breathe. "You're not Norma Jeane anymore," they said. "You're Marilyn Monroe." And Marilyn did what she always did. She became what they needed. The woman men wanted. The fantasy women envied. Her lips, a promise. Her eyes, a question. But behind the camera, she was reading Dostoevsky, writing poetry, and studying acting under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio in New York. She wanted to be respected as an artist, not just adored as an image. She once said, "I don't mind being sexy, but I hate being a thing." And that was the struggle. The world loved her for what she showed them, but rarely for who she was. She began to challenge the system that made her. She walked out on contracts, started her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, a radical move for a woman in the 1950s. Reporters called her difficult. Men in suits called her naive, but she was neither. She was brave and far ahead of her time. At the height of her fame, she could make the world stop. When she walked into a room, cameras froze. People forgot their words. Even her co-stars admitted she didn't just act, she happened to you. But while the world saw the goddess, she still felt like the girl from the orphanage, trying to prove she was more than the image reflected in the mirror. In private, she doubted everything: her worth, her talent, her place in the world. Fame had made her visible, but it had also made her painfully alone. Friends would later say that sometimes she'd disappear for days, just to walk by the ocean and listen to the waves. She said it reminded her that life moved on no matter how famous you were. The tide always washed everything away. And still, she rose. With every film, every headline, every heartbreak, Marilyn was rewriting what it meant to be a star. She wasn't just Hollywood's golden girl anymore. She was its heartbeat and its warning. By the mid-1950s, the name Marilyn Monroe had become more than a person. It was a symbol. A promise of perfection wrapped in white silk and red lipstick, America's dream in a dress. But when you become a symbol, people stop seeing your soul. To the world, she was laughter and allure. To herself, she was an actress still searching for the truth inside the script. Behind the glittering premieres and magazine covers, Marilyn spent long nights at home reading, writing, thinking. She filled notebooks with thoughts about love and fear, about how people wanted her to be light, but never asked about the shadows that made that light. She wrote once, "They only see me as Marilyn Monroe. As soon as they realize I'm not her, they run." That sentence carried more truth than any headline ever could. Every time she looked in the mirror, she saw two faces staring back: the woman the world wanted and the girl she used to be. The studio's makeup brush painted away the freckles, but it couldn't hide the loneliness in her eyes. Insomnia became her nightly companion. To sleep, she took pills. To wake up, she took others. To smile in public, she rehearsed. To survive, she performed. Even success felt fragile. When she tried to make more serious films, Bus Stop, The Prince, and The Showgirl critics doubted her before she even stepped on set. But she refused to let them define her limits. She told one reporter, "I want to grow. I don't want to stay the same. I want to live and learn and change." That was Marilyn, always trying to evolve in a world that only wanted her frozen in fantasy. Every photograph was a performance. Every interview, a tightrope walk between truth and expectation. She learned how to give the world just enough to keep them close, yet guard the parts of herself that were breaking. Friends said she could light up a room and then, when the lights went out, sit in silence for hours. Sometimes she'd stand before a mirror, touch her own reflection, and whisper, "Don't forget who you are, Norma." That whisper, half prayer, half warning, was the only thing keeping her from disappearing into the myth shed created. The public adored Marilyn. Men pinned her posters on walls, women copied her style. But adoration isn't the same as affection. She could make millions laugh and still eat dinner alone. That was the paradox she carried. The more famous she became, the lonelier she felt. And loneliness, when polished by fame, doesn't look like pain. It looks like champagne. It sounds like applause, but it feels like silence. She was one of the most photographed women in history, and yet she once said she couldn't recognize herself in half those images. The poses were perfect, but the person was fading. Still, she showed up to every set, every interview, every flashing camera, because somewhere deep inside, she believed that maybe, if she worked hard enough, someone would finally see her, not the dream, but the person. But Hollywood doesn't fall in love with people. It falls in love with reflections. And Marilyn Monroe, the most dazzling reflection of them all, was starting to wonder what was left of the girl behind the glass. Even as Marilyn rose to the peak of fame, she carried with her a private ache that no spotlight could reach. She was adored, desired, celebrated, and yet profoundly alone. She searched for love like the world had forgotten it existed. 3 marriages each, a desperate attempt to anchor herself, each ending in heartbreak that left her more exposed than before. Her first husband, James Dougherty, was a childhood escape, married at 16 to avoid the orphanage. But they were children playing adults' games. The marriage dissolved quietly, leaving her to face the world on her own. Then came Joe DiMaggio, baseball legend and American hero. The world watched them, enchanted by the glamour and the headlines. DiMaggio adored her, loved her fiercely, but he loved the fantasy more than the woman herself. He wanted a wife, not an icon, and soon, the cracks began to show. She married again Arthur Miller, the playwright, the intellectual. He saw the brilliance beneath her smile, the soul beyond the camera lens. He understood her hunger to be more than the image. But even love can crumble under the weight of fame. The press, the films, the endless expectations, they were forces too heavy for any heart to hold. And then, there were moments she shared with no one at all. Secret dinners, quiet walks along the ocean, journals filled with confessions no one else would read. She wrote, "I'm only good at pretending to be happy." Even John F. Kennedy, the President of the United States, admired her, a brief, electric moment in history, but even the most powerful man in the world could not reach the heart that ached inside her. When she sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," the world was spellbound. Every note, every gesture flawless, unforgettable. Applause filled the room. Yet that night, she returned to an empty apartment. No one to greet her. No arms to hold her. Behind every dazzling smile, every camera-ready laugh, was the quiet desperation of a woman seeking refuge. She craved affection, but not the kind that applauds performance. She wanted intimacy, the kind that could not be scripted, staged, or photographed. Her loneliness became a companion. Sometimes she would call friends late at night, only to hang up before they answered, afraid of revealing how fragile she truly felt. Even amid adoration, she felt the heavy hand of invisibility. Her fame had made her visible to everyone, yet unseen to those who mattered most. Soft piano notes, heartbeat continues. She turned to the page, the pen, and her own voice. She poured her insecurities into letters, diaries, and poems, trying to understand herself before the world defined her. Friends recalled her walking in silence along the streets of Hollywood, watching strangers pass, and imagining what it would feel like to disappear not as Marilyn, but as Norma Jeane. Her loneliness was not dramatic. It was quiet, persistent, a shadow that followed her even through the brightest premieres. Fame gave her the world, but stole the one thing she truly desired: peace. Love was everywhere she could see, but nowhere she could hold. And yet she continued. She went on film sets, attended glittering parties, smiled for the cameras, because she understood something fundamental. Even when alone, you must show up. Even when broken, you must perform. Even when unseen, you must be visible. Marilyn's story in these years was a paradox. The world adored her brilliance, her charm, her beauty, and she adored them back with a full heart and all the fragility she could muster. But no applause, no photograph, no love letter could heal the emptiness that accompanied being a star in a world obsessed with perfection. Her solitude was her truest companion, and in that silence, the real Marilyn, the woman behind the image, was quietly fighting to exist. By 1962, Marilyn Monroe had lived more in 36 years than most could in a lifetime. She had climbed Hollywood's highest peaks, touched the hearts of millions, and yet she was exhausted. Exhausted not just in body, but in spirit. The studio system that had built her empire was now tearing at its foundations. Every contract, every obligation, every demand felt like another weight pressing down on her fragile frame. Rumors surrounded her like ghosts. Scandals whispered and printed painted her as unstable, unpredictable, fragile. They didn't see the truth. They didn't see a woman who had given everything she had just to survive. Affairs, friendships, flattery, betrayal, they all blurred into one relentless performance. She had learned to smile through it, to charm, to captivate, to enchant. But when the camera stopped clicking, the lights dimmed, and the applause faded, she was alone. She tried to rest, tried to find peace in the small things, a cup of coffee in the morning sun, a walk through the quiet streets of Los Angeles, a letter written to no one in particular. And yet, the shadow never lifted. Her insomnia persisted. The pills, the crutches she leaned on to sleep, to wake, to smile, had begun to feel like chains. Each day she asked herself, who am I beneath all this? Her friends noticed her fragility. Her assistant, her confidant, even doctors tried to intervene. She laughed when they worried, promised she was fine, but inside, she felt the slow erosion of everything she had built. The world still adored her movies, magazine covers, perfume ads. The laughter, the beauty, the legend, all intact. But she couldn't reconcile the fantasy with the woman who stared back in the mirror. August 5th, 1962. A day forever etched into the collective memory. The light went out. Officially, a drug overdose. Unofficially, a mystery that still haunts the world. The headlines were instantaneous, sensational. Hollywood's brightest star dies young. Marilyn Monroe, lost forever. And yet, no headline could truly capture the woman she was or the pain that had accompanied her brilliance. The woman everyone wanted to touch, wanted to adore, wanted to hold, was gone before anyone truly held her. In those final days, Marilyn was a reflection of her life, brilliant on the surface, fragile beneath, searching for love, for peace, for herself. Even in death, she remained a paradox, iconic and elusive, visible to millions, yet still deeply unknown. And while the world mourned and conspiracy theories swirled, those who truly knew her remembered the Norma Jeane she had never lost, the little girl who had learned to survive, the woman who had fought to be seen, the star who had dared to shine. Her passing marked the end of an era not just for Hollywood, but for anyone who had ever dreamed of being more than what the world expected. Because Marilyn Monroe had taught us something profound, that brilliance does not erase pain, that fame does not fill emptiness, and that even the brightest stars burn from the inside out. More than 60 years have passed, and Marilyn Monroe's face is still everywhere. Posters line walls, perfume ads shimmer in store windows, her image reproduced in art, fashion, even tattoos. But maybe her real beauty wasn't in the platinum hair, or the curve of her lips, or the sparkle of her eyes. Maybe it was in her vulnerability. She showed the world something that few dared to reveal. Being loved by everyone doesn't mean you can love yourself. Being admired does not make you whole. Being celebrated does not erase the pain. She once said, "Imperfection is beauty, madness is genius, and it's better to be absolutely ridiculous than absolutely boring." Those words were not vanity. They were survival. A reminder to herself and to all of us that being human means being messy, emotional, imperfect. When you see a photo of her, smiling in that white dress, standing over the subway grate, remember that was courage. Courage to be seen, even when the world didn't understand. Courage to love, even when love returned only heartbreak. Courage to create, even when the critics whispered she would fail. Her legacy is more than films, more than magazine covers. It is a story of persistence, of artistry, of a woman refusing to be reduced to an image. She showed us that the human spirit can be brilliant even when it is fragile. Marilyn's life teaches us lessons that echo far beyond Hollywood, that identity is precious. You must fight to protect who you are beneath the expectations of others. That vulnerability is strength admitting your fears, your pain, your uncertainty does not make you weak, it makes you alive. That love is complicated. The love we receive may not always heal, but the love we cultivate for ourselves is the foundation for everything else. And perhaps most importantly, imperfection is not failure, but a reflection of being authentically human. Her story reminds us that the brightest stars are not those without flaws, but those who shine despite them. Every role she played, every line she spoke, every photograph taken, was a piece of a larger puzzle, a woman striving to define herself in a world determined to define her. She taught us that courage often looks like a smile in public, while we fight battles no one sees in private. That is the lesson Marilyn left behind, that brilliance is inseparable from vulnerability, and that being human is far more remarkable than being perfect. Even today, when we see her image in neon lights, or hear her laugh in a film clip, or read her words on a page, we are reminded, behind every legend is a person. Behind every smile is a story. And behind every story is the courage it takes to live it. So, when we admire her, we should not only marvel at the glamour, but honor the humanity, the struggles, the triumphs, the heartbreak, and the hope, because that is the true gift Marilyn Monroe gave to the world, not just a star to adore, but a mirror that reflects our own vulnerability, courage, and desire to be seen. Marilyn Monroe wasn't just a movie star. She was a mirror reflecting the world's obsession with beauty and its blindness to pain. Behind every perfectly curled hair, behind every dazzling smile, was a story the world may never fully understand. She taught us that fame is fleeting, that admiration is not love, and that the brightest light can hide the deepest shadows. And yet, she also showed us something enduring: the courage to be seen, the courage to love, to create, to exist, even when the world insists on seeing only the surface. Her life, her struggles, her brilliance, all of it reminds us that we, too, are more than what others perceive, that our imperfections are not failures, but proof of our humanity. So, when the spotlight fades and the applause quiets, remember Marilyn Monroe, not just the icon, not just the legend, but the woman fragile, brilliant, and endlessly courageous who dared to shine even when she felt invisible. And maybe that is her final lesson: love deeply, live boldly, and let your own light shine even when the world is only watching the reflection. If Marilyn's story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe so her light can keep reaching hearts everywhere. Because stories like hers remind us all that every smile has a story worth remembering.